Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, an unfortunate update to Naz Reid's wrist injury that he suffered against Phoenix on Wednesday. We'll talk about how long he might be out for now and what impact that will have on the Timberwolves rotation moving forward. Who's going to get more minutes while Naz misses a significant amount of time? I also want to talk about the Rudy Gobert, Finch comments related to officiating. Are officials really giving the Wolves a short end of the stick because of the market they play in? I'll give my thoughts on that, plus a preview of a huge Wolves-Lakers game on Friday. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And happy Timberwolves game day. A huge Wolves-Lakers game Friday night. We'll preview that at the end of the show. Plenty to get to here, though. First, off the top, but a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this show for free. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. That's on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, a lot to get to today. Obviously, a huge Wolves-Suns game Wednesday, a big Naz Reid injury, the officiating stuff, and then the Lakers preview Friday. I want to start with the Naz news. I'm actually recording this just a little bit late Thursday, actually, I guess early Friday, a little bit after the news broke about Naz's wrist injury and the actual, I guess, diagnosis. Shams Charania of The Athletic and Stadium, along with John Krasinski, of course, locally of The Athletic, are reporting that Naz Reid has a broken wrist and will miss what they're terming as a, quote, significant period of time. Obviously, there's a wide range there, and that could really mean anything. Feels like broken wrists are usually, 6-8 weeks, maybe, give or take a week or two on either side. I would think absolute best case is 4 weeks. I mean, a month from now would be, I guess, like the start of the second round of the playoffs. So, absolute best case is probably somewhere in the middle of the second round of the playoffs. That's if the Wolves either avoid the play-in or get through the play-in and get through the first round. I mean, it's a brutal way for Naz's regular season to come to an end, and unfortunately, potentially his Timberwolves career to come to an end. I hope I'm wrong, either because the Wolves get to the second round, Naz recovers and plays, or because the Wolves retain Naz in the offseason. But I mean, how tough is Naz Reid? Breaking his wrist on that dunk attempt, always trying to throw it down on somebody, bracing his fall, breaking his wrist, playing for several minutes, essentially one arm. I mean, he did dribble a little with his left hand, but clearly was just kind of like dangling it, when it was favoring it, just letting it dangle when he was dribbling with his right hand and shooting and knocked down 1 or 2 free throws right after it happened. But the Wolves, I guess the Wolves have not officially said this yet, but the reporting from John Krasinski and Shams Charania is that Naz is out for a, quote, significant period of time. What does that mean about the Wolves rotation? Let's cover that now. And then I want to say this next segment. I do want to get to the Rudy Finch comments. I talked a little about the officiating on Thursday's show, and Marnie and I did a little on the live postcast Wednesday night, but I'll talk a little more about it because I'm sure potentially by the time you're listening to this podcast, there's fines coming down from the league, and it's a hot button topic that I typically don't cover a lot on the show, but it's important to discuss, I think, now. So we'll do that next. In terms of the Wolves rotation, I mean, the obvious players to get more minutes, right? Like, so the Wolves played forever, it seems like forever, 52 games consecutively without Karl-Anthony Towns. That meant that Rudy was the starting center, Kyle Anderson was the starting 4, and we saw Naz as the big off the bench. And we saw Naz play 5 with Anderson at the 4. We saw Naz play 5 with Taurean Prince at the 4. We didn't see Naz and Rudy play a ton together, but that's because Naz was the backup center. And there was never really a time where Luka Garza or Nate Knight were consistently in the lineup as like a third big. There were some spot minutes here and there. They certainly both filled in when both Rudy and Naz missed some time, a couple games here and there. So what does this look like now? It's obviously a different dynamic because Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert are going to start together if they're both healthy. So now who's your bench big? You have to have a center coming off the bench because even if you stagger Cat and Rudy, somebody's still got to at least play the four. I mean, you could, I guess, avoid playing another center if you truly stagger Rudy and Cat, but that means they're going to play together a little bit less so that they can each get a breather. So the obvious answer to get more minutes is Kyle Anderson, who's already arguably the most important player, certainly off the bench. That isn't, certainly if you set aside, the quote unquote big three, Rudy, Cat, and Ant, you're talking Kyle Anderson is the next most important player. But in this scenario, he's going to see more minutes, right? Because he's going to play the four with Cat at the five. He's going to play the four with Rudy at the five while Cat's getting a breather. Potentially even Jaden McDaniels gets more minutes in this situation because he could play a little bit more four. Now, with as big as Chris Finch likes to play, it's maybe less likely than it would have been under previous coaches, but I think we'll see McDaniels see a little bit additional run if he can stay out of foul trouble. To me, the most obvious answer is Taurean Prince. Now, Taurean missed the last game due to illness. He's actually listed as questionable for Friday night's game against the Lakers. But Taurean Prince can play the four. Chris Finch likes to play him at the four. And I think he's probably the best player who can give you consistently both two-way, can be a two-way player, right? Give you both good team and individual defense, be switchable defensively, versatile on that side of the floor, and also knock down an open three. Your other options are more traditional bigs, right? Luka Garza obviously has played well. He's had some monster games in Iowa. Recently, he had like a 40-plus point game just the other day. Does Luka Garza get more run? Well, probably, but he's more of a five than he is a four, mostly because of the defensive limitations. So is he only going to play? I guess you play him next to Karl-Anthony Towns for some spot minutes while Rudy rests, but then you're also going to play some minutes with Towns at the five. So, maybe it's 4 or 6, 8 minutes a game. Maybe it's Nate Knight. To me, I think I've said this a lot. Nate Knight can play the four. He's got some defensive limitations as well, but I think he's a well-rounded enough professional big that he could play some four and might actually be a better fit for what the Wolves want to do with their bigs than what Garza is. Now, of course, Garza's played better in limited action than Nate Knight this year, but I'm bullish on Nate Knight as a rotational big in the NBA. I think he can be that. And perhaps this is his opportunity because what he does, in my opinion, more closely replicates what Naz Reid does. Now, it's not the same thing. Knight's not taking anybody off the dribble in the same way as Naz Reid, but he's more likely to do that than Luka Garza. I think he gives you a little bit, certainly more athleticism and a little bit more dynamic ability in the open floor. Again, not to the level of Naz Reid, but I just think he's a little more well-rounded and probably a little less foul prone than Garza. So I would campaign for Prince and Nate Knight to be the primary beneficiaries of the unfortunate Naz Reid injury. The dark horse here is Josh Minott. Now, we've seen him get rotational minutes a couple of times in the not too distant past. Just a couple of weeks ago, he saw some rotational minutes on that Wolves road trip. And he's a little bit more of a small ball four, not a small ball four, but if he's your four, you probably don't have the biggest lineup on the floor. Of course, he's very long, and that wingspan is helpful. But I think depending on the matchup, you could see Chris Finch go with a few more Josh Minott minutes here and there. And my comp for him when he was drafted was like a bit of a differently shaped, if you will, a different profile, but similar in terms of production to a Brandon Clark. The big for Memphis, where it's gonna be bouncy. But Brandon Clark with a 3-point shot, really very good defensively, very athletic, very long, switchable defensively, great on the offensive glass, solid on the defensive glass, all of those things. I think Minott next year, looking way ahead, this will certainly be a topic of the podcast this summer, is Josh Minott as a rotational kind of swing 3-4 guy, especially if, say, Taurean Prince's contract is non-guaranteed. If he's traded or not retained this summer, Josh Minott could fill in that. Now, he's not the same player. I don't think the Wolves could count on that production yet, certainly offensively from Josh Minott, but he would provide a bit of more of a jolt in terms of athleticism, open floor capabilities, etc. So this could be an opportunity to get a peek at Josh Minott. Of course, this is Friday is arguably the biggest regular season game, and since game 82 between Wolves and Nuggets. What was that? The Jimmy Butler year, so like 5-ish years ago. Um, like Wolves-Lakers is huge on Friday. Is now the time you throw Josh Minott in there? I don't know. I think Prince, if he's healthy, if he's over the illness or at least able to play Friday, I think he's the biggest beneficiary minutes wise. And then some combination of Kyle Anderson, Jaden McDaniels. I'm curious to see if Nate Knight gets any run. Otherwise, it's probably Garza, with the dark horse being Josh Minott. Really interested to see how Chris Finch plays this, but obviously devastating that Naz is injured. I feel for Naz. I mean, he's trying to get a big contract this summer. Now, obviously, this is a much preferred injury than anything that would be structural to any part of his body, right? It's a broken wrist. It's very unlikely, knock on wood, to plague him beyond this, call it 2-month window. So teams in free agency should know that Naz is going to be healthy by the fall. So it may not hurt him too much in terms of free agency, but it certainly hurts the Wolves now, and it hurts because Naz has been playing so well. So feel for Naz. He's obviously a hard worker, and Marnie's talked a lot on the postcast about just how fun he is to root for the team, for the people that cover the team closely, people that are around him all the time, that he works hard, he treats everybody well. He's a good guy, and it's difficult to see this happen to a guy like Naz, and hopefully he comes back stronger than ever, and hopefully it's on, hopefully the Wolves are in the second round and it's 6 to 8 weeks or so. Completely throwing that out there, but as just kind of out of thin air, but hopefully that's what happens. I think that would be probably best case scenario. All right, let's talk about this grand NBA conspiracy that Rudy Gobert espoused after the game against the Suns on Wednesday night. I want to do that. We'll talk about Chris Finch's comments. We'll do all that here next. We'll close the show later with the Wolves-Lakers matchup. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. The tournament is heating up. The college basketball tournament, that is. You know what I'm talking about. Final Four this weekend. Championship shortly thereafter, Monday. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the nets. All that's on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, on Wednesday night against the Suns, the Timberwolves were out free throwed by the Suns by a ridiculous margin. And Devin Booker attempted more free throws than the Wolves as a team did. Let's pull the actual number here. The Wolves shot 12 free throws as a team. The Suns shot 27, and Devin Booker alone shot 15 free throws. 15 free throws for Booker, 12 for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I talked about this a little bit, I think, the middle of the show on Thursday. So if you want to hear my kind of immediate take on this, I'll give you the 20 seconds right now. Yes, officiating was a factor. Yes, it's something that Booker shot more free throws than the Wolves as a team. I thought that there were certainly some bad whistles in this game. There were some head-scratching stretches, but the Wolves' sloppiness, turnovers, the vast majority of moving screens that the Wolves were called for, which was like roughly 6 of their 21 turnovers, were absolutely moving screens. It does not change the fact that it was called inconsistently, but the Wolves don't have a huge leg to stand on when they were committing all of these fouls. There were a couple of bad ones. I'm not, denying that. I just think the free throw discrepancy was in part because the Wolves' lack of aggressiveness going to the rim. I know Finch said after the game he thought they were just as aggressive. I would disagree with that. And then also the Wolves' turnovers were the two biggest issues. Now, after the game, Chris Finch gave some comments. And basically, I'm going to paraphrase this, said, hey, Monty Williams came out last week. He used his name, but he said Monty Williams came out last week and was, critical of officiating, and then look at what happened for them. So Finch's here's part of his exact quote. He says, quote, "They went to the line 27 times. We went to the line 12 times. Sitting up here and talking about it must have worked for them." And then he says, quote, "The free throw disparity got us. I thought we were driving and playing with just as much force as they were." So he's, of course, referencing Monty Williams complaining. I don't remember if it was the Lakers game last week, but he was complaining about the Suns' lack of free throws. And he was fined, I think, $20,000 for that. I don't actually know if Finch is going to get fined here because he said the free throw disparity got us. I guess he did say, I thought we were driving as playing as much force as they were, but he didn't say it as pointedly maybe as Monty Williams did, although maybe comparing the Wolves and him to the Suns and Monty Williams in that regard may get Finch. As of now, I don't believe he's been fined. It hasn't been announced, so perhaps he will on Friday. Now, Rudy Gobert was not that Finch was subtle. Gobert was he was the opposite of subtle. I'll read part of what he said. Gobert said, "It's BS. BS. It's not fair." It related to the fouls called against the Wolves. "Every night, I've been in this league for 10 years, and I try to always give the benefit of the doubt. But it's hard for me to think they're not trying to help them win tonight," referencing the Suns. He says, quote, "It's hard for me to think they didn't try to help the Warriors win the other night or the Sacramento Kings the other night. It's just so obvious. As a basketball player that's been in this league for so long, it's disrespectful and it sucks, to be honest. We work so hard to be in a position to compete with the best. We get manipulated into those situations where it just impacts the game for the other team too much. They know how to do it. They do it a lot of different ways. Tonight was another way of doing it, but it's all good. We understand it's also business, et cetera, et cetera." And then I'll skip ahead. He says, "I think you want to see KD in the playoff." Oh, sorry. He says, "We understand we're not the biggest of markets, and we're a team that I think you want to see KD in the playoffs, Steph in the playoffs. You want to see LeBron in the playoffs. The Timberwolves are not there yet. We got to keep putting our head down, keep playing through that. And it's frustrating for sure, especially for me." Now, I don't have a problem with players and especially with coaches doing this and just sticking up for themselves because I think it's fair to do it every now and again. I totally am okay with it, especially when it comes to a coach. But Gobert, like, he's got something to gripe about. And I think both things here could be true, right? What I said earlier about officiating is maybe the third biggest problem for the Wolves in their loss against the Suns on Wednesday. And I stand by that. It doesn't mean that the Wolves haven't gotten a bad whistle this year because they have. And I've talked about it in the show. I try not to make it a regular topic, but Karl-Anthony Towns has never gotten a good whistle. Anthony Edwards has never gotten a good whistle. I'm not saying like never once, but like over the course of each of their careers. Cat has gotten a bad whistle. Ant's gotten a bad whistle. And in a Timberwolves uniform, at least, Rudy Gobert also has. There's no question about it. Now, it doesn't mean that it was the number one reason they lost Wednesday. It also doesn't absolve the Wolves for all their technical fouls. And I've said this many times before. It's a vicious cycle. The Wolves, there's bad calls made against the Wolves or calls not made that would benefit the Wolves. They complain, they get technicals, then refs are expecting technicals. They call more technicals. The Wolves complain more. There's more bad foul calls. And the officials treat the Wolves unfairly because of those reasons. I believe that that's true. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't agree with Rudy Gobert saying that it's because the Wolves are in a small market. I want to be extremely clear about that. I know there's fans that believe that. There's no way. That's not a thing. That's not what's happening here. That's different. This a vast small market versus large market conspiracy is different than saying that there could be bias from official to official, player to official to certain players, officials to certain coaches. I don't think there's any question that does exist because officials are human, players are human, coaches are human. It probably does. I don't think there's a coordinated conspiracy to keep big markets in and small markets out. I don't think, in fact, I know there's no way that's what's happening here. It's just very unplausible. It does not mean that there's not individual biases. It also doesn't mean that the bias can't spread, right? I mean, like you can see that in almost any walk of life. So I think, officials talk. Officials are all humans. They all talk. They all have eyes and ears, and they see and hear what's going on. I'm sure the officials don't like the Timberwolves because of how the Timberwolves react. So whether they mean to or not, there's going to be a bias that inserts itself into the game. And I don't think it's because the Wolves play in Minnesota. I mean, Rudy references the Kings. Like, Sacramento is a smaller media market than the Twin Cities is. clearly, I mean, that doesn't, I guess they're in California, if that's what he meant. Like, that's not what's happening here. I don't know why Ant and Cat don't get a good whistle in the first place, but them complaining as much as they do does not help them. And I've said this before, that doesn't make it right. It's just a reality of how biases work. And they need to do their part to not complain on every call, because we've seen them both complain on calls where they're not actually fouled. We've seen them both complain about saying they didn't foul someone when they did foul someone. And they're far from the only players in the league to do it. And I understand that's what makes it so frustrating. But Ant and Cat could be very demonstrative sometimes. And that's part of the problem here. I think what Chris Finch did was right. I think most of what Rudy said was okay. I think the not insinuation, straight up saying that officials want certain markets to win is not accurate, and he's going to get a big fine. I don't think there's any way he should be suspended. I mean, what Fred VanVleet said several weeks ago was, I don't know, in some ways worse, and he was not suspended. So it'd be ridiculous if he was, but he'll be fined, and he'll be fined more than $20,000. I'm pretty confident of that, because he was literally calling into question the integrity of the entire league, not just necessarily an individual official or a crew of officials. So there's a fine coming. I don't agree with what he said there, but I do agree that the Wolves have gotten a lot of bad calls this year. I also think it's important that the Wolves try and move on from this. Chris Finch said his piece. We'll talk about the Lakers, by the way, and how good their whistle's been over the last couple of months here in the next segment. Chris Finch has said his piece in the media. He'll probably get a little fine, maybe $20K like Monty did last week. But the Wolves have to move on. There's 5 games left in this regular season, and they cannot spend them whining about officiating. They just have to play through it. And I know it's the worst, but like, they got to do it. They have no other choice. All right. I do want to close with a Wolves-Lakers preview. The Lakers are mostly healthy now. I think this is certainly an interesting matchup, a big game. The Lakers are only a half game behind the Wolves now. I do want to talk about what the Lakers do really well, and really the headline here is getting to the free throw line. So we'll do all that here next. All right, Wolves-Lakers on Friday night. This game's on NBA TV at 7 p.m. Central. The Timberwolves have actually fallen into a tie in 7th now with New Orleans. The Pelicans won. They beat Denver easily by like 19 on Thursday night. So the Wolves and Pelicans are now tied. They also have split the 2 games they've played so far. So, by the way, the second tiebreaker after head-to-head record is conference record. The Wolves and Pelicans have an identical conference record of 27-21. The next tiebreaker is winning percentage against teams that make the playoffs. And I did not take the time to do this by hand. It's not easily accessible. I don't know where the Wolves stand there, but we all know that the Wolves have played better against better competition than worse competition. So, yeah, I guess it's relative, but like, we know the Wolves already have tiebreakers against the Thunder. The Thunder, Clippers. At the moment, though, the Mavs and Jazz aren't in the playoffs. So I guess we're only looking at the Thunder and Clippers. The Suns are a split. The Warriors are a split. Currently, the Pelicans are a split. The Wolves do have the tiebreaker against the Lakers. So I guess Lakers, Clippers, Thunder. So anyway, I don't know how the Pelicans have done against playoff teams, but at the moment, at least according to ESPN, they have the Pelicans 7, the Wolves 8, but with the same record, the same conference record, and a head-to-head split of 1 game, 1-1. Remember, the regular season finale for the Wolves is Wolves-Pelicans on that Sunday afternoon, April 9th, I believe, a week from Sunday. So big game. The Lakers are only a half game behind the Wolves. The Wolves already have the tiebreaker. But, of course, if the Lakers win and the Wolves lose, the Lakers will actually be a half game ahead of the Wolves. So a big game, because they'll fall to 9th if they lose to the Lakers. LA has been playing really well lately. Really, really well. They just split a pair of games against the Bulls. Overall, they've won 4 out of their last 5. And if you go back even further, they've won, 8 of their last 12 or something like, 8 of their last 12. So they've played really well recently. They kind of retooled at the trade deadline. The pieces are fitting well. Malik Beasley's in a bit of a up and down roll off the bench. Jared Vanderbilt's a regular starter for them. Rui Hachimura's played well for them. But the Wolves beat the Bulls by 11 the other night. And the Lakers are looking like a dangerous team right now. And I know that sounds crazy based on Wolves fans have seen in head-to-head matchups this year. But like Anthony Davis dropped 38 on the Bulls the other night. LeBron's back. He's starting again now. 25 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists against the Bulls. Austin Reeves has been playing well. D'Lo's back healthy. We know that that's, I don't know. D'Lo's all over the map in terms of his availability. But, I mean, the Lakers look dangerous. And the number one thing that they've done over the past couple of months is get to the free throw line. There's a tweet floating around by Mason Ginsberg, who is a basketball blogger. He has a bar graph that he posted that had from StatMuse that says it's free throw differential by team since the referees issued their apology to the Lakers after that missed call. Remember when LeBron was hit on the arm in that Celtics game and Patrick Beverley took the camera and showed the official back before the deadline? Since then, since late January, the Lakers have a plus 263. 263 in terms of free throw differential. The next closest team has less than half of that. The Heat are a plus 123. The Lakers have more than twice the differential of them. There's only 2 teams above 100 that aren't the Lakers. The Heat at 123, the 76ers at 104. The Lakers have a plus 263. It's just insane. Like otherworldly. So for the season, I don't know what it was before then, but I mean, you better believe for the season, the Lakers look pretty good in those categories. They're number 3 for the season in terms of free throw rate as a team, and they're number 1 when it comes to opponent free throw rate, meaning avoiding opponent free throws. They don't allow free throw attempts to opponents. It's just incredible. So if you want to look at per game numbers and take the pace and possessions out of it, the Lakers are first in free throw attempts per game, and they allow the second least free throw attempts per game to opponents. It's incredible. And this would feed into, I guess, the Rudy Gobert big market, small market conspiracy. It is kind of crazy when you think about it. D'Angelo Russell doesn't get to the line. So you're talking primarily Anthony Davis. LeBron's been hurt. I guess Russell Westbrook, before he was, traded and ultimately cut and ended up on the Clippers, he got to the line a fair amount, but I don't go back and pull all these box scores. I don't know who's getting there. They don't have anybody else averaging more than 3 free throws per game. Actually, D'Lo is in a Lakers uniform. Austin Reeves is a shade under 4. But all that to say, the Wolves are foul happy. They love to foul. And they're going to need to be careful with the Lakers. Perhaps it's not a coincidence. I think it probably was that Chris Finch got on his soapbox before the Lakers game. I think it had more to do with it being the game they just played than it did having the Lakers be the opponent and the next time out. But the Lakers get to the line a bunch. They don't foul. They don't allow opponents to get to the line. That is a huge thing that the Wolves have to be very cognizant of going into this game. And you better believe the coaching staff will talk about it. The Lakers are a pretty middling rebounding team, so not a huge concern there. If the Wolves play like they have the last several weeks on the glass, now they lose Naz Reid, and Naz has been much improved on the glass this season compared to where he was the last 2 years. But, if the Wolves play like they have recently on the glass, in the Kings game, the Hawks game, the Lakers game, and the Golden State game, I think the Wolves would be fine on the glass. It's primarily the free throw thing is my biggest concern. The Lakers do play fast. They don't shoot a ton of threes. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. You want to be careful for Malik Beasley going off against his former team. We know that he loves to do that. Malik is shooting just a shade under 35% in 20 games in a Lakers uniform. D'Lo, by the way, 40% from 3 in a Lakers uniform, averaging 18.5 points per game in a dozen contests for them. He's missed, I believe, 8 since the trade and been overall pretty good for them. So obviously look out for a Malik or a D'Lo revenge game. D'Lo missed the game against the Wolves last time out. So you better believe he's going to be looking for some post-trade deadline revenge. Mo Bamba is the only guy that's out right now, rotation player for them. Otherwise, they're healthy. They're healthy, and that wasn't the case the last time out. The last time the Wolves played the Lakers, Minnesota won by, let's see, how much did they win by? They won by 8. This was just post All-Star break. Gobert led the way with 22 and 14. Ant had 19 points, but he shot just 7 of 16. Of course, there was no Karl-Anthony Towns. And then off the bench, Naz had 15 and 8 against the Lakers. Anthony Davis had 38. Nobody else did anything against the Wolves. Malik Beasley had 15 in the starting lineup. Again, they were shorthanded at the time. They had, let's see, there was obviously no LeBron. They did have AD, no D'Lo. They had Austin Reeves coming off the bench. Now you still got to look out for Lonnie Walker. He didn't do much against the Wolves last time, but he has those big games off the bench for LA too. So, perimeter defense in general, again, not as much 3-point shooting, but just perimeter defense in general, containing the ball, and then doing what you can to kind of muck things up for Anthony Davis, make his life a little bit more difficult. But the primary concern is avoiding putting the Lakers on the line a ton. The last time the Wolves played the Lakers shot 24 free throws. The Wolves shot only 16. It's not exactly the 27-12 difference, but it's not all that far off, right? That the Wolves had against the Suns on Wednesday. All right. Hard to understate, or hard to overstate, I should say, how big this game is on Friday. And then the next time out, the Wolves play Sunday afternoon. And so Lakers Friday night, that's a home game for the Wolves. And then Sunday is the second game of this 2-game homestand. That is against Portland, a Portland team that shut down Damian Lillard, is not officially eliminated from playoff contention in the West, but for all intents and purposes is packing their bags for the summer. And then next week, just one game during the week. They have Monday off, Tuesday game at Brooklyn, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off before at San Antonio next Saturday afternoon, and then closing the season against the Pelicans next Sunday afternoon. This Friday after the Lakers game, we will not have a post-game podcast. So, well, there won't be a podcast. There won't be a postcast either. So no live postcast with Barney on Friday. There likely will not be one on Sunday the 2nd as either. So just keep that in mind. But we will do the regular post-game podcast, really kind of recapping the weekend. We'll focus mostly on the Portland game on Sunday because it'll be the most fresh. But next Monday's show, Monday the 3rd, is going to kind of recap the weekend, Lakers-Blazers games. That'll be our next show. No weekend shows this weekend. It'll be a little different next weekend. We'll be sure to cover those games as we come down the stretch of the regular season. But we'll definitely see you on Monday. Again, no live postcast Friday night. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now make your second listen the game-to-game NBA podcast every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.